A young boy named Alec was peacefully fishing by the lake one day when a strange man approached him and asked if he wanted to learn magic. I mean, who says no to free magic lessons? So from that day on, Alec began spending his days training under Eldas, an old but sharp-tongued magician. One day, Eldas decided to teach him fire magic, because who doesn't want to shoot fireballs? It was a bit tricky, but after a full day of hard work, and probably a few singed eyebrows, Alec finally got it. He complained about how long it took, but Eldas reminded him that most people would need an entire month to pull off what he did in a single day. Eager to keep going, Alec asked for another lesson, but his teacher just laughed and suggested they take a break and go fishing instead. Alec reluctantly agreed, though he clearly wanted to keep training. Eldas chuckled and said Alec had so much natural talent that even without a teacher, he'd still become an exceptional mage someday. Curious, Alec asked why Eldas decided to train him in the first place, but before he could answer, a fish yanked the line, and the conversation immediately turned into a tug-of-war with dinner. Months passed, and Eldas continued teaching him from thick, confusing magic books that looked more complicated than algebra. Eventually, Alec began understanding everything bit by bit. Then one spring day, Eldas arrived with bad news. He had to leave the capital and couldn't train Alec anymore. Before leaving, he gave his student one last piece of advice. With your talent, you could easily become a court magician someday, but if anyone ever offers you that job, run for your life. It's not worth the trouble. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Alec with one final question hanging on his lips. Alec finally asks Eldas why he decided to teach him magic in the first place. The old mage admits it wasn't random. Alec's mother once did him a huge favor, and he wanted to repay that kindness by looking after her son. Years later, Alec is now studying at the Royal Academy, flipping through an old yearbook when he spots a familiar name, Eldas. As expected, the man had been the Academy's top graduate and even became a court magician, but apparently got banished from the kingdom for reasons unknown. That's when Alec, in true anime protagonist fashion, decides the best way to honor his mentor is to become a court magician himself. You know, the exact thing Eldas told him not to do. Fast forward, and guess what? Alec ends up banished, too. Turns out history really does repeat itself. He joined the so-called hero party, made up of the genius crown prince Regulus, the mage Lenny, and the knights. While on a mission, Regulus suddenly fires him mid-battle, declaring that all Alec ever does is stand in the back casting boring support spells. Alec tries to explain that maybe, just maybe, those support spells are the reason they're not dead yet, but Regulus, who's apparently allergic to logic, interrupts him. He sneers that someone who can only use support magic is too pathetic for the party. Ironically, Alec never even wanted to join this circus. The prince forced him into it with a royal order. Then, to make things worse, Lenny and Ix join in and call him useless. But let's be real, the real useless one here is Prince Regulus, who literally banned commoners like Alec from carrying weapons just so no one could steal his spotlight. When Alec suggests that everyone in a team should be armed for safety, Regulus looks at him like he's just spoken ancient dragon language. In the end, Alec gets kicked out and left wondering why he ever tried to help these ungrateful fools. Still, because he's too kind for his own good, he leaves behind detailed notes on monster patterns and battle strategies, basically doing Regulus's homework one last time before walking away like a true gentleman. While Alec was on his way to deliver a letter to the castle, the guards suddenly stopped him at the gate. Turns out, he'd been stripped of his title as a court magician, meaning he no longer had permission to even step inside. Talk about getting demoted faster than a failed intern. Just then, Lenny showed up, not to help, of course, but to rub salt in the wound. She'd always hated Alec for being praised at the Magic Academy, especially after he broke the dungeon record that she couldn't. So naturally, she came all the way here just to mock him. When she was done being awful, Alec swallowed his pride and asked her to at least deliver a letter to King Fergus. After all, the king himself had ordered Alec to join Regulus's party, so this message was pretty important. But Lenny, being the jealous menace she is, shredded the letter right in front of him and told the guards to throw him out. Classy move. It had been 4 long years since Alec became a court magician, and despite all his efforts to fix the imperial court, nothing changed. Just as he was wondering what to do next, he heard someone call his name. When he turned around, he saw Yura, an old friend, rushing up to hug him. They sat by the canal catching up, and Alec explained everything that had happened since they last met. Furious, Yura shouted that she hated the kingdom of Galdina, where nobles constantly discriminated against commoners. Alec quickly told her to quiet down before she got herself arrested, but she shrugged it off. No one was around anyway. Despite feeling bad for him, Yura admitted she was actually glad he'd been kicked out of the prince's party, because now he was free to join hers. When she asked him to help clear dungeons with her team, Alec hesitated, wondering if she really wanted someone like him. But Yura smiled, saying she knew better than anyone that he was a total magic powerhouse. Hearing someone finally recognize his worth made Alec's eyes well up. He stood tall, grinned, and told Yura that he'd be honored to join her party, and just like that, our banished mage got a second chance at adventure. The next morning, Alec and Yura set out for the city of Fizzle. Along the way, Alec can't help but recall Eldas's warning about avoiding the Imperial Court, and how life would have been way less miserable if he had actually listened. But hey, hindsight's 20/20ths, right? Meanwhile, back in the capital, Regulus gets word that Alec has officially left town. The prince immediately starts trash-talking him, calling him a sorry excuse for a mage. Turns out, he only ever forced Alec to join the hero party because everyone said he was a prodigy. In truth, Regulus hated having a commoner on the team. Lenny, ever the loyal gossip, chimes in that now they can replace him with someone of pure noble blood, and without that incompetent fool, Regulus will finally get credit for clearing a dungeon faster than anyone else. Yeah, good luck with that. A few days later, Alec and Yura arrive in the city of Fizzle. She enthusiastically explains how amazing this place is, no discrimination, friendly people, and the perfect base for adventurers. Then she suddenly remembers, they still have to get Alec registered at the Adventurers Guild. Unfortunately, the receptionist drops a bomb. Alec doesn't qualify. To explore dungeons past level 30, he needs a special license, and to get that, he must have been registered with the guild for at least 2 years. Yura tries asking for an exception, but the receptionist politely tells her that rules are rules. Turns out, Yura's friend Kesha had already come earlier to ask for permission, but she was apparently so rude to the receptionist that they lost any chance of special treatment. Great teamwork there, Kesha. Yura sighs in disappointment. Her party had already reached the 52nd dungeon floor, but now they can't go any deeper until Alec gets licensed, which will take 2 whole years. Still, instead of sulking, she decides they'll just focus on exploring areas he can access and enjoy their time together. Later that day, the two head into a dungeon and soon find themselves swarmed by red hornets. Yura boosts Alec with enhancement magic, letting him slice down a few, but it barely makes a dent. She's confused, the second floor was never this intense before. Alec, ever the logical one, figures the hornet nest must have been disturbed, causing all the bugs to go berserk. So yeah, just another peaceful day for the newly formed duo. Yura puts up a defensive shield and charges into the hornet swarm, but Rain quickly shouts for her to hang back. It's safer to pick off the bugs one by one. Yura reminds him that he used to be unstoppable before becoming a court magician. Back then, a swarm like this would have been nothing. Now, free from worrying about bruising the prince's ego, Rain can finally go all out. He unleashes a torrent of attack magic, burning dozens of hornets, then regroups with Yura and casts a massive thunderbolt spell that fries the rest. Just when victory seems theirs, a giant earthworm bursts from the ground and snatches Yura, clearly the reason the hornets were acting crazy. Thinking fast, Rain asks if her defense magic is still as strong as it was in the academy. Yura fires back, asking if his attack magic is still as powerful. Confident in each other's skills, Rain summons a roaring fire tornado, engulfing the worm in flames. Yura is caught in it too, but her shields hold firm. Once she's safely on the ground, she grins and tells Rain his magic is just as incredible as before. She can't wait to reunite with the rest of their team and relive old adventures. Before graduation, Rain had been part of a legendary student team: Ornis, the genius warrior, Krasia, the sharpshooting archer, Yura, the brilliant support mage, and Rain, the prodigy attack mage. On graduation day, they broke the all-time dungeon record by clearing the 68th floor, earning top ranks at the academy. As they walked home discussing their futures, Rain suddenly announced he planned to become a court magician instead of joining their adventuring team. His friends were disappointed, especially Ornis, since together they could have formed the strongest party ever. Still, they respected his decision, knowing he must have a good reason. Before they parted ways, Yura made it clear she wasn't giving up on recruiting him, and now, the second chance had arrived. Yura is there to extend an official offer, welcoming Rain to her party. To celebrate, she treats him to a hearty dinner. But Yura isn't great with alcohol. One mug of beer later, and she's wobbling, belligerent, and barely keeping upright. Soon enough, she collapses into her seat and falls asleep. Rain, ever considerate, uses magic to cover her with his jacket so she won't catch a cold. Suddenly, a man appears behind him, commenting that Rain is awfully considerate for an adventurer. Thinking he's just some random drunk, Rain ignores him. That doesn't sit well with the man, who swings his bottle at Rain. The glass shatters on impact, but thanks to a quick magic shield, Rain is unharmed. Before he can react, the man calls him by name, saying he lives up to the rumors, and slides a dungeon pass across the table as a sort of apology for the crude test. Confused, Rain wonders who this mysterious man could be. Then Yora, still slightly drunk, asks, "What's the guildmaster doing here?" Shocked, Rain realizes the man is the guildmaster himself. Leviel stands. He wants to see what the former court magician can do firsthand, inviting Rain to the training center. A little while later, they arrive at the assessment room. Leviel officially introduces himself, and Rain recalls hearing stories of his time in an S-rank party. This won't be easy, but Rain is thrilled. It's the perfect chance to sharpen his skills before stepping into a real dungeon. The match begins. Rain launches a thunderbolt spell, but Leviel rolls out of the way and retaliates with a sharp water slash. Realizing long-range attacks won't work here, Rain decides to go in close and fight hand-to-hand. But Leviel casts enhancement magic, boosting his speed and strength to insane levels. Rain struggles to keep up, and when Leviel finally strikes, even though Rain blocks with a shield, he's still slammed into a wall like a ragdoll. Yora is starting to worry, but Rain gets up and assures her he's fine. The speed of Leviel's earlier attack had caught him off guard, but now he's thinking ahead, and then he starts laughing. Why? Because he realizes he can do more than just dodge. Under the prince's command, Rain had been limited to support and evasion, but as an adventurer, there are no restrictions. He coats his wand in magic, transforming it into a blazing sword, and charges forward. Leviel launches another water splash, but Rain easily slices through it. Leviel is impressed, but he doubts Rain can handle his punches. He enhances himself and charges in again. Rain, however, had already prepared a counter for the dash attack. As soon as Leviel gets within range, he's hit by a full-force thunderbolt spell, leaving him exposed for Rain to strike. Leviel can't help but admire Rain's skill. Now he sees why Yora praises him so often. The test isn't over yet. Leviel activates his ancient artifact, summoning giant gauntlets capable of leaving massive craters with a single punch. Rain realizes that one hit could be devastating, so he treads carefully. He tries another thunderbolt, but it barely slows Leviel, whose artifact allows him to heal over time. The longer the fight drags, the worse Rain's odds become. Determined, Rain repeatedly strikes, but Leviel dodges every attack. Mocking him, Rain asks if he's scared to face him head-on. That gets under Leviel's skin, prompting a wild swing, just the opening Rain needed. A swift slash to the stomach lands, finally doing some damage, but it's only a start. Leviel charges again, and Rain blocks with a shield, which shatters under the sheer force. Luckily, it breaks Leviel's momentum, allowing Rain to strike his chest. Not one to lose. Counters with a hammer fist, creating a massive dust cloud. Yora shakes her head, thinking he's taking things a little too far for a mere test. A hit like that should have knocked Rain out, but somehow he sneaks behind Leviel and lands one final strike. That's all the strength he has left. Leviel snaps, and Rain collapses, unconscious. Yora rushes to his side, while Leviel admits he might have gone a bit overboard and declares Rain the true victor. While Yora tends to him, Ornis shows up, tired of waiting, only to discover Rain had been dueling Leviel. He scolds Leviel for using his ultimate weapon in a friendly spar, but Leviel shrugs, he just got carried away. Now fully convinced, Leviel grants Rain a dungeon pass and anything else he needs, as long as he promises not to sue. Even though the test was unfair, Ornis congratulates Rain on passing. Exhausted, he's carried inside and set on a couch to rest. By now, everyone knows the story of the injustice Rain endured as a court magician, surviving in a castle full of elitist idiots who despised commoners. Clearly, Rain had to work insanely hard to maintain his position. Just then, the receptionist barges in with bad news for the guildmaster. Leviel steps out to handle business, leaving Rain and the others in his office, with strict orders to not touch his alcohol collection. Naturally, Ornis immediately heads for the expensive-looking bottle, planning to annoy Leviel later. He then asks Yora to fill him in on Rain's past as a court mage. The details are wild. Rain was tasked with protecting the prince but wasn't allowed to carry a sword or use magic that might outshine him. On top of that, he had to carry the party's luggage and manage their items. Worst of all, after forcing Rain to only use support magic, the prince had the audacity to call him useless, despite Rain's specialty being attack magic. Ornis can barely wrap his head around it. Yora explains that Alec went out of his way to learn support magic just to appease the prince, even though it wasn't his specialty. Hearing everything the prince put him through, Ornis nearly explodes with rage. As soon as Alec wakes up, Ornis suggests putting the dungeon raid on hold and marching straight to the kingdom to teach that prince a lesson. Alec pats his shoulder and says there's no need. While frustrated, he's not angry enough to confront the prince himself. But Ornis is more than willing to do it on his behalf. Alec reassures him, saying all that matters is going on adventures with friends. Karma will handle the prince anyway, now that no one's there to clean up his messes. Ornis gets a brilliant idea, they'll become the world's greatest adventurers. Eventually, news will reach the castle, and the prince will regret kicking Alec out. When he comes begging, Alec can look him in the eye and throw as many insults as he likes. Alec likes the sound of that and fist bumps Ornis, promising they'll become the strongest party together. Meanwhile, in another room, a member of an S-rank party is being bandaged while recounting her disastrous mission to Leviel. Her teammates are stuck in the dungeon, so she asks him to assemble a rescue team. Leviel calls an all-hands-on-deck meeting, but only those already at the guild are available. He tells everyone they'll form a team to rescue Krista's party trapped on floor 64 of the dungeon. All the adventurers exchange worried glances. They know how deadly that floor is. While the meeting is underway, Krista finds Alec alone in the guild master's office. Judging by his injuries, it's clear he's had a rough time. She asks why he's here instead of attending the meeting. Alec shrugs, saying he didn't want to intrude. Everyone at the meeting is A-rank, and he still considers himself an outsider compared to them. Krista raises her hand and uses restoration magic to heal Alec. She then reassures him that no one here would ever call him an outsider. While he was a court magician, Alec had subconsciously learned to never stand out or speak up, afraid of offending the pretentious nobles. Even though things are different now, breaking 4 years of habit overnight isn't easy. Crazia notices his struggle and pats him on the head, saying she's always there if he needs help, which makes Alec feel a lot better. Moments later, Ornis and Yura return. Ornis excitedly tells Alec they have the perfect excuse to head into a dungeon, a place nicknamed the Tank Killer. It earned that name because all healing magic is useless inside, so they must rely entirely on potions. Alec is surprised Crazia agreed to the mission, since healing is her specialty. She reluctantly accepts, mostly because Ornis insisted it's a good starter mission for the team. Alec worries he might not be strong enough to help, but Yura reminds him he's the backbone of the operation. The team literally couldn't do it without his magic. Their goal: reach the party stuck on floor 64. Going the normal route would take too long, but they have a secret weapon, a dungeon core. This rare item, brought back by Krista, lets them skip boss battles up to the floor it was obtained on. They can now clear a path to floor 64, though caution is still necessary. The floor boss is said to be an undead monster, so everyone relies on Alec's attack magic. They instruct him to conserve energy until the big fight. Alec asks if it's really okay for him to sit out most of the minor fighting, and Ornis reassures him it's the best strategy to avoid exhausting his magic before the boss battle. The team teleports to floor 64 and is immediately confronted by a group of skeletons. Ornis rushes ahead, taking out skeletons with his spear like a one-man army. Yura calls after him to slow down so she can cast defense magic, but honestly, with how strong he is, he probably doesn't even need it. Meanwhile, Alec and Crazia move slowly through the dungeon. Alec comments on how surprised he was to find out that Ornis owns an artifact just like Leviel. Crazia explains that it's basically just a spear enchanted with sharpness and unbreaking 3, but for someone like Ornis, that's more than enough. It's getting a bit boring since Ornis is handling all the fodder alone. Alec offers to help, but Ornis waves him off, insisting he's got it under control. As they move further in, Alec suddenly senses something sneaking up behind him. Instinctively, he fires a lightning bolt, startling everyone. He explains that his senses picked up an unseen presence, and Ornis, trusting him, asks Alec to locate it. Alec can't see the creature, but his instincts say it's right there. He conjures a monosaur and strikes, revealing it to be a Grim Reaper. Ornis cheers, impressed that Alec's senses are still sharp. Alec suspects Ornis might have known about the Reaper beforehand, but in reality, Ornis just wanted to let Alec figure it out on his own to boost his confidence, a rare act of trust he never received as a court magician. While Alec is happy for the recognition, he still yells that it doesn't excuse what Ornis did. Crazia and Yura admit they also knew about the invisible monsters but kept quiet, apologizing to Alec. Crazia jokingly tells him to take his anger out on Ornis instead. Alec warns Ornis they'll have a long talk about this later, but first, the mission continues. The party presses deeper and soon encounters an even bigger horde of skeletons. Ornis is thrilled, seeing it as a proper challenge, but Yura reminds him they're on a rescue mission, not a personal battle royale. Ornis, naturally, ignores her and tells everyone to stand back so he can handle it solo. Alec refuses to let him fight alone again, joining the battle while Yura boosts them with enhancement magic. While Alec and Ornis easily clear the skeletons in front of them, they forget that Yura isn't exactly battle-ready, leaving her completely defenseless. Luckily, Crazia swoops in to save her. Alec doesn't want to risk another close call, so he orders everyone to get behind him. He casts a wide-area thunderbolt spell, clearing the path, and the team continues deeper into the dungeon. Before moving on, Ornis asks Alec why he keeps spamming lightning bolt. Back in school, Alec used all sorts of flashy spells, so why the change? Alec reflects on all the times the prince recklessly charged into dungeons, leaving him to clean up the mess. Over time, lightning bolt became his go-to because it's fast and reliable. Suddenly, a terrifying sound echoes from deeper in the dungeon. Yura is sure it's the floor boss, so they need to move fast. They let Ornis sprint ahead, he's the fastest, and with Yura's speed boost, the rest follow. Even after all this time, Alec can't help but marvel at just how absurdly fast Ornis is, especially with magic boosting him. Eventually, they catch up, only to find Ornis casually sitting on the edge of a cliff, watching the chaos below. Alec looks down to see a guy being chased by the floor boss, begging for help. But Ornis doesn't seem too concerned. He explains that the guy is Loki, the support mage of the party they're here to rescue. Most of Loki's teammates are decent, but Loki himself is a nightmare. No one likes him. Loki yells at Ornis, threatening to haunt his dreams if he dies, but Ornis seems unfazed. Just then, Loki trips and falls, and Alec suggests helping. After all, the monster could eat him. But the others shrug. This is just Loki being Loki. The monster steps onto a magic circle embedded in the floor, and Loki flashes a huge. In the next moment, a pillar of fire shoots through the monster's abdomen, and Alec realizes that Loki must have set traps to lead it into trouble. The others confirm it. Despite Loki's annoying personality, the guy is a battlefield genius. The monster keeps stepping on more traps, and Loki laughs at its gullibility. But he eventually runs out of traps, leaving him completely defenseless, and the monster is about to squash him. Just in time, Alec and the others jump in. Ornis drags Loki to safety while the rest stall the monster. When it targets Alec, Yura shields him. Then, the monster turns straight for Ornis and Loki, seeking revenge for all the traps. Ornis runs under the monster and tosses Loki to Krazia. Yura guides Krazia to take him to higher ground for safety. With Ornis free, he unleashes his full strength, asking Yura to pour all her support magic into him. She goes all out, casting every enhancement spell she knows. Ornis charges, dodges an initial strike, and plunges his spear below the monster's eye, but it's not enough to stun it. He's knocked back, crashing to the ground, and Yura shields him just before the monster stomps down. The shield won't hold for long, so she urges Ornis to hurry. From the cliff, Loki finally pays attention. Seeing Alec back in action, he's excited. He's heard the rumors about the legendary genius. Alec begins forming multiple magic circles simultaneously, 20 at once. Even creating 5 would be genius territory, but 20. Now that's a show. The monster charges at Alec to interrupt him, but Ornis blocks its path. Once ready, Alec unleashes a relentless torrent of thunderbolt spells to weaken it, finishing with a concentrated blast. The monster narrowly dodges, so Alec warns everyone to brace for the counterattack. Ornis calls Krazia for cover fire, and she rains arrows down on the monster. This gives Yura enough time to bind it in place. With the monster restrained, Ornis drives his spear straight through its head. The monster survives and tries one final desperate attack on Alec. Big mistake, it turns out Alec had the perfect spell ready for this exact situation. Years ago, Alec's master taught him a special spell, reflection magic, and since then, he's been the only mage capable of pulling it off. When the monster launched its deadly blast, Alec redirected it at full force, causing a massive explosion. After it was burnt to a crisp, Ornis leapt in and delivered the finishing blow, splitting the monster's head in two. With the battle over, Loki strolled over to congratulate everyone. He was especially impressed by Alec's performance, recalling rumors about the former court mage, like how he once defeated a Hydra with a single spell. Alec politely thanked him but clarified, "I'm not actually a court mage anymore." Loki was shocked. Whoever fired someone as talented as you must be idiots. He was grateful for the rescue, but pointed out that the rest of his team were probably still fighting the tougher floor boss. Everyone groaned. There was a second floor boss. Loki explained, when his party arrived, there were 2 floor bosses. They couldn't handle both at once, so his job was to distract the low IQ one while the others dealt with the second. The low IQ boss looked like a knight in black armor, but since the floor is full of undead, it's probably possessed armor. Physical attacks wouldn't do much, meaning Alec's magic was their best shot. Loki handed Alec a cross artifact, impressed by how he could handle himself in close combat. Apparently, Alec had a knack for tricking enemies into seeing him as both the biggest threat and easiest target. Alec was surprised Loki could figure that out from just a few minutes of observation, but strategists are perceptive like that. The artifact was called Schwar, and Loki said Alec could have it, for one condition. He must use 0 magic against the second boss. Krazia nearly choked. Expecting a mage to fight without magic. Crazy. But Loki insisted it would work. His plan relied on trickery and deception. Since the Death Knight likely expects a magical attack, Alec going entirely physical would catch it completely off guard. Anyway, remember that genius prince who fired Alec? Yeah, this is him now, running for his life through a dungeon while 2 oversized caterpillars chase him like he owes them rent. The prince can't believe what's happening, since these monsters used to be easy for him. He yells at Lenny to blast them with magic, but when she tries, nothing happens. Naturally, the prince calls her useless, classic, then decides to handle it himself. He spins dramatically, slashes one, and his sword bounces off. The look on his face says it all. Reality just crit-checked his ego. Lenny in the night panic, grab the prince by the arms, and start sprinting toward the exit as the poor man tries to figure out why his mighty swings suddenly feel like wet noodles. Then it hits him. His decline started right around the time he kicked Alec out of the team. But instead of realizing that Alec was actually carrying him, he convinces himself that Alec must have cursed him out of revenge. After escaping, the prince storms into the royal lab to see the magician Vojan Forners, demanding a curse check. Vojan runs a quick scan and calmly tells him there's no curse. The prince refuses to accept that and insists there's no way he'd ever struggle with clearing the 30th floor unless Alec hexed him. Trying to stay professional, Vojan explains that the 30th floor has an anti-magic field, which disables support magic. So, his weakened state was probably just the result of losing his buffs. The prince immediately scoffs and declares that all support magic is useless coward stuff anyway. Vojan, visibly dying inside, decides not to argue. After all, there's no spell to cure arrogant stupidity. He does, however, find it odd that Alec didn't warn the prince about the anti-magic field. After all, Alec was the legendary student who once reached the 68th floor. The prince laughs that off, saying there's no way a commoner idiot like Alec could have done something so impressive. Vojan wisely keeps his mouth shut. Just then, a guard rushes in to report that the king wants to see the prince about the Alec situation. The prince smirks, thinking daddy's going to back him up, but the moment he enters the room, the king starts telling him a story about Eldas, and it's clear this won't end in applause. The king begins telling the prince a story about Eldas, a court magician he banished years ago, because apparently, being smart and outspoken was a crime back then. Eldas was a noble who dared to stand before the mighty king of Galana and say, "Hey, maybe stop treating commoners and magicians like dirt or something bad might happen." Naturally, that didn't sit well with his majesty, so out went Eldas, stripped of his noble title and all. But instead of crying in a corner, Eldas enrolled in the Magic Academy, silenced his haters, and graduated as valedictorian. The man basically said, "Watch me thrive." He could have lived the high life after that, but no, he returned to the castle to work again as a court magician. There, he kept nagging the king about equality until he mysteriously disappeared a year later. The king admits he never really took Eldas's words seriously, until now. Lately, he's begun to wonder if the old guy was actually right, which is why he sent the prince to explore the dungeon. He wanted to test whether nobles were truly superior to commoners. Judging by how miserably that went, he's starting to think, maybe not. He declares it's time to change the kingdom's policy and start hiring based on talent, not birth. The prince is absolutely horrified, sputtering that letting commoners stand as equals would be a disgrace to their family name. The king calmly admits that, yes, he's the one who raised his son to think like that, but times change. The prince doubles down, saying hanging around people like Alec only brings misfortune, and he points to his current pathetic state as proof. But before he can continue whining, a guard enters and presents what's left of the book Alec wrote, a detailed guide on clearing the dungeon's 30th floor. The king sighs and explains that Alec made that book especially for Regulus, but thanks to Lenny's little tantrum, it got torn to shreds before anyone could use it. Regulus can't believe what he's hearing, so he quickly fakes being sick and excuses himself before his ego completely implodes. After he leaves, the king turns to Vojan and says that while helping his son might be the hardest job in the kingdom, he'd appreciate it if he tried anyway. Vojan, being the loyal, and probably underpaid, royal magician, promises to do his best. Meanwhile, Regulus is having a full-on meltdown. The poor guy can't handle the idea that Alec might have been the talented one all along, because that would mean he's been the problem this whole time. And that's a reality he just refuses to live in. On the other side of the story, Alec is chatting with Loki, asking why he's forbidden from using magic against the dungeon boss. He knows the boss is immune to physical attacks, so swinging a sword seems kinda pointless. But Loki, ever the mastermind, explains that the goal isn't to beat the boss with a sword, it's to trick it into thinking Alec is just a regular melee fighter. Basically, he wants to play mind games with a monster. Kraja doesn't really get why they need to go through all that drama, so Loki explains that this particular boss isn't some brainless beast, it's as smart as they are. Alec finds that hard to believe, but Loki insists and asks him to just go along with the act until he gives the signal. Reluctantly, Alec agrees. Then Loki turns to Kraja again, saying he needs her help with something a bit dangerous. Since running to his friends would take too long, he plans to use teleportation magic. The team collectively panics, because teleportation is a nationally guarded secret, and just knowing about it could land them in jail, or worse. But with no better option, they all agree to help, and also unanimously decide that if anything goes wrong, they're blaming Loki. While Loki draws the teleportation circle and walks Kraja through the process, Alec chats with Yura to ask if Loki can really be trusted. Yura admits she doesn't like his smug personality, but when things get serious, he's the best person to rely on. She even mentions how, 2 years ago, Loki planned a massive raid on a high-difficulty dungeon, and thanks to his genius strategy, not a single person died. That's all Alec needs to hear. He decides to put his full trust in Loki's plan. When the teleportation circle finally lights up, everyone steps inside. Yura is completely awestruck. It's her first time seeing real teleportation magic. But Loki, ever casual, just tells her this is a budget-friendly version that'll only take them to his chosen destination. Loki warns everyone that he'll be teleporting them right in front of the boss, so they'd better be ready to swing the moment they land. A flash of light later, boom. The whole squad materializes smack in front of Loki's other party members, who are barely hanging on against a towering dark knight. The two look like they've been through a blender, exhausted and out of mana. Luckily, Ornis dives in to relieve them, clashing swords with the knight in a flurry of sparks. While the knight's focused on him, Alec tries to pull a sneaky backstab, but the monster instantly leaps into the air. Apparently, even headless undead knights have great reflexes. It charges both of them at once, giving no room to breathe. Meanwhile, Loki and Kraja rush to pull Raywell and Marbell out of the danger zone. The knight's armor is ridiculously tough, like someone forged it from pure plot armor, and there's clearly no one inside. But Ornis couldn't care less. He rushes in again, feints, and pins the creature's cape to the ground. That gives Alec the perfect opening to slice its head clean off. As the helmet clatters to the floor, Alec hopes that's the end of it. Spoiler, it's not. The headless knight suddenly starts moving again, sprouting creepy tendrils from its neck like a discount horror movie monster. Turns out, it's actually a Dullahan, and the monster they killed earlier was probably its horse. Alec gets distracted by this revelation, because who wouldn't, but when he looks up, surprise. The Dullahan is already airborne, sword raised high. He barely manages to block, but the force nearly shatters his artifact blade. Clearly, the monster had been holding back earlier, because now it's serious mode time. Thankfully, Alec isn't alone. Yura is in the back, spamming buffs like her life depends on it, supercharging Ornis until he's glowing brighter than a Christmas tree. With a mighty yell, Ornis slams the knight, knocking it back and giving Alec a moment to regroup. Unfortunately, the Dullahan doesn't stay down for long. It casually reattaches its head, because why not, and lets out an ear-splitting scream that scrambles everyone's brains. Before Alec can recover, it dropkicks him across the room at Mach speed. Thankfully, Yura manages to throw up a barrier just in time, turning what would have been a wall crater into a soft landing. Yura rushes over to check if Alec is okay. He groans but gives her a thumbs up. Yeah, still alive, barely. Didn't expect that Tin Can to be a martial arts expert. He admits that if Yura hadn't saved him with that barrier, he'd probably be a pancake right now. Catching his breath, Alec calls out to Loki, "How much longer do I have to keep sword dancing with this thing?" Loki, still scribbling magical runes like a madman, yells back, "Just 5 more minutes." Easy for him to say. Alec nearly got turned into monster pate, and he's down to his last 3 potions. Ornis, who's also struggling, shouts, "Quit whining and get back in there." The two dive back into the chaos, doing their best to keep the Dark Knight busy while Loki finishes whatever 4D chess plan he's working on. Finally, after what feels like forever, Loki declares, "Preparation complete," and activates a giant glowing magic circle. He starts laughing like a Saturday morning cartoon villain, which, naturally, makes the Dark Knight panic and charge straight at him. It slashes Loki across the chest, only for everyone to realize it's an illusion. The massive magic circle was a decoy meant to lure the knight into a trap. Ice suddenly spreads beneath its feet as the real Loki, standing smugly atop a nearby tower, watches everything unfold. Meanwhile, Ornis steps on a teleportation rune that Loki and Kraja had set earlier and instantly appears behind the knight, smashing it forward. Marbell drops from above with an overhead strike, but the knight narrowly dodges, just as planned. Another ice trap triggers, freezing its legs and slowing it down. Realizing who's behind all the tricks, the furious knight scales the tower to take Loki out personally. Loki unsheathes a glowing blade, clearly more for style points than survival, while Raywell screams from below, he's not strong enough for that fight. But Loki isn't completely suicidal. He had Yura cast a 7-fold strength enhancement on him beforehand. The problem? His body is definitely not built for this kind of power-up. Every swing looks like it's breaking his own bones. While Loki barely holds his ground, Yura casts a binding spell, trapping the knight, but not before it manages to land one solid hit, sending Loki plummeting off the tower. As he falls, Loki just grins, because of course he does, and yells, "Everything's going according to plan. Alec, finish the job." Taking the cue, Alec raises his hands and summons a dazzling web of magic circles that fill the battle. But Alec's body is at its limit. Sweat pours down his face as the strain of maintaining the massive spell array begins to tear at his stamina. Despite being exhausted, Alec forces himself back on his feet to unleash Thunderbolt acceleration. The spell hits hard, sparks fly everywhere, but the armored knight refuses to go down and is even breaking free from Yora's binding magic. She's desperately trying to hold it back, shouting at Alec to finish the job already. Easy for her to say, his body is about to shut down like a phone at 1% battery. It's the second time today he's had to use such a massive spell, and his mana's running on fumes. But Alec isn't about to quit now. Gritting his teeth, he powers through and completes one of his ultimate spells. A massive lightning dragon roars into existence and zaps the knight into vapor. The battle's over, but so is Alec's stamina. He collapses, muttering something about how having reliable teammates really makes a difference. Yora walks over, smiling, and says it's actually them who rely on him. They couldn't have handled that monster without him. Ornis laughs and reminds Alec about their little bet before the fight. Whoever passes out first has to do a dare. Since Alec technically fainted, he's the loser. But since it happened after the battle, Ornis decides to go easy and gives him a wholesome dare. Stop bottling things up and talk to Ornis, Yora, or Anne-Rose whenever something's bothering him. Then Ryal shows up to thank the group, while Marbell goes for a more physical show of gratitude, planting a kiss on Alec's cheek, much to Yora's absolute horror. When Marbell flirts and asks Alec to go dungeon raiding with her, Yora immediately shuts it down, declaring he's their magician. Finally, the Recloma party's leader, Rue, thanks Alec for saving them and offers to write a recommendation letter, probably the least dramatic thing that's happened all day. Alec looks a bit lost when he hears the word recommendation. So everyone explains that to be promoted to S rank, you need two things: a recommendation from an S rank party and the guild master's approval. The second part shouldn't be a problem, so Rue confidently tells him to leave that to him. Afterward, Alec collects the knight's magic stone, officially marking the Recloma rescue mission as a flawless success. When they return to the guild, the receptionist congratulates him and mentions that he's become quite the talk of the guild lately. Apparently, saving people with giant lightning dragons tends to make headlines. She asks if he's managed to rest after the big battle, but Alec, ever the tough guy, insists he's in perfect shape. Just as he's about to head out, Leviel stops him and says he has a visitor from the kingdom of Galana. That immediately catches Alec's attention since he thought he'd cut all ties with the kingdom. Still, curiosity wins, and he agrees to meet the visitor, only to find Vogan waiting for him. Out of everyone he used to deal with at the castle, Vogan was one of the few decent people, so Alec greets him politely. But before he can even say, "Long time no see," Vogan jumps straight to the point, asking if Alec was trying to get Prince Regulus killed by not warning him he wasn't ready for dungeon diving. Alec stays calm and simply asks whether Vogan really thinks Regulus would have listened even if he had warned him. Vogan can't argue with that logic but grumbles that he got stuck with a miserable assignment after Alec was fired, one he calls a total waste of his time. When Alec asks if that means Vogan is now Regulus's party magician, Vogan snorts and says, "Magician? Please. I'm basically a royal babysitter at this point." Apparently, after Alec left, Regulus decided to challenge the 30th floor of the dungeon solo, and got wrecked for it. Vogan had hoped to teach him a valuable lesson, but instead, the prince threw a tantrum and demanded that Vogan escort him here so he could confront Alec in person. When Alec realizes this means Regulus is already in the city, specifically, down in the underground training arena, he sighs. Of all the people to run into today, this was not on his bingo card. Still, he figures it's the perfect chance to finally settle things once and for all. Even though Alec could just pretend Regulus doesn't exist and go about his day, he decides to head down to the arena and face him in person, partly out of principle, partly out of curiosity, and maybe just a tiny bit of boredom. As Alec and Vogan make their way down the stairs, Vogan sighs and says the only thing the prince has going for him is his unshakable pride. He then adds that he's never really understood why nobles insist on proving they're superior to commoners. Seems like a full-time job with zero pay, he jokes. When they arrive at the arena, Regulus is already waiting, standing dramatically in the center like he's posing for a painting. To Alec's surprise, the first thing the prince says is that the king plans to reform the way the kingdom is run. Regulus admits he doesn't agree with it but will go along out of respect for his father. For a moment, Alec actually thinks maybe the kid has grown up a little. That hope dies 5 seconds later when Regulus declares that he still can't stand listening to nonsense from commoners like Alec. With a sigh, Alec tells him that if he had just listened to advice earlier, he wouldn't be in such a pathetic situation now. But it's clear Regulus isn't hearing any of it, so Alec decides not to waste another breath. After all, the prince has spent his entire 15 years being told he's better than everyone else. The idea that he might be the problem just doesn't compute. In a desperate attempt to prove he's not a royal disappointment, Regulus draws his weapons and challenges Alec to a duel, demanding Vogan to serve as the witness. Regulus charges in recklessly, forcing Alec to block with his wand. To his surprise, the prince is using daggers this time instead of his usual long sword. Years ago, Alec had actually advised him to start with daggers, since his small frame couldn't handle a long sword properly, advice Regulus immediately ignored back then. Now, it seems he's finally taken it, just several humiliations too late. Unfortunately, swapping weapons doesn't automatically grant skill. Alec sidesteps one of his clumsy attacks, sending Regulus face first into the dirt. It's so pitiful it's almost impressive. Realizing Vogan might have orchestrated this encounter, Alec asks what he told the prince. Vogan smirks and admits all he said was, "If you want to prove Alec isn't stronger than you, then do it with your own hands." Guess Regulus took that literally. At the end of the day, it was Regulus's choice to march in here and challenge Alec. No tricks, no cheap shots, just a good old-fashioned one-on-one duel. Gotta give the guy at least some credit for that. His daggers, being artifacts, pack a decent punch. When Regulus clashes with Alec head-on, he actually manages to shatter his magic shield, which, to be fair, is impressive considering most people can't even scratch it. Unfortunately, that's about the peak of his success. Turns out, Regulus had been training non-stop with those daggers ever since Alec got fired. The sessions taught him a harsh truth, that Alec's support magic was the real reason their party had made it so far in the dungeon. After losing him, Regulus tried tackling the 30th floor over and over again but kept crawling back half-dead each time. Eventually, he stumbled upon some recovered pages from Alec's report, and reading them made his blood boil. Not because they were wrong, but because they were all right. Everything Alec warned him about had come true. That realization hit hard. Regulus finally understood how skilled Alec really was, and how horribly he'd treated him in the past. So, determined to prove himself, Regulus tells Alec to activate his artifact and fight seriously. Alec raises an eyebrow and asks if he's sure about that. After all, they both know who's winning this fight. But Regulus, prideful as ever, refuses to back down. Before their weapons collide, Alec pauses and asks one last question, whether it's true that the king plans to reform the royal court. Regulus confirms it, explaining that his father had been testing the strength of the commoners all along, which is why he sent both of them into the dungeon. If that's the case, it means the king never actually looked down on Alec. Those 4 painful years in the palace weren't for nothing. For once, Alec feels genuinely relieved. Then he looks back at Regulus and says with a grin, "All right, then. Brace yourself, I won't be holding back." He charges forward, power crackling through his artifact. Regulus tries his best to stand tall, though his trembling knees give him away. It's clear he knows he's about to get flattened. But at the last second, Alec changes direction and slams his weapon into the ground beside him instead. The shockwave sends dust flying everywhere, leaving Regulus coughing and confused. He demands to know why Alec spared him after everything, the insults, the arrogance, the years of mockery. Alec just smiles. "Because beating you senseless won't fix the past," he says. "But maybe this will make you start thinking for yourself." Regulus had built his entire identity around the belief that he was superior simply because he was a noble. But now, with that illusion shattered, he's left wondering, if I'm not better than everyone else, then who even am I? He originally came here thinking that dying by Alec's hand would at least let him keep some shred of honor. But instead of hatred or vengeance, all he sees in Alec's eyes is pity. And somehow, that hurts even more. Normally, Alec isn't the type to laugh at someone else's misery, but this whole situation is just too absurd. He came here expecting a dramatic fight to the death, and somehow it's turned into a self-help session. The sheer irony of it all makes him chuckle, and before he knows it, the anger he felt earlier just fades away. Seeing that Alec isn't mad anymore, Regulus bows his head and apologizes for how he treated him. Alec is honestly shocked. He didn't think the proud prince was capable of humility. Still, he gets it. Regulus only acted the way he did because of his upbringing. It doesn't excuse his behavior, but since the kid's finally trying to change, Alec decides to let bygones be bygones and offers his hand. Regulus hesitates, halfway reaching for the handshake before pulling back, probably to protect whatever's left of his noble pride. Then, to everyone's surprise, he takes out the court magician's cloak that once belonged to Alec and apologizes for taking it that day. He even gives him a letter from the king, stating that there's a seat open for him at the royal court if he ever wants to return. Alec raises a brow and asks, "So, is this an order or a request?" Vogan clarifies that it's strictly a request, Alec can refuse if he wants. And he does. Thanks, but no thanks, Alec replies. I've already got the best party I could ask for, I'm not leaving them again. Regulus nods, respecting his choice, but insists that Alec keep the cloak since it rightfully belongs to him. With that, he turns to Vogan and says it's time to go. As the two walk away, Regulus can't help but smile faintly, a sign that both men have finally found a bit of peace and closure. The next morning, Alc meets up with his friends and asks if they have any free time. Yura, Krasia, and Ornis all say yes, so Alc asks what they had in mind. He wants them to show him around Fizzle, since he's still getting used to the city. Normally, everyone would be happy to help, but Ornis and Krasia see this as a golden opportunity to give Yura some alone time with Alc. They quickly invent fake excuses and tell Alc he'll have to go with just Yura. Alc doesn't notice anything suspicious, and Yura laughs it off, knowing she's just been handed an easy win. Almost immediately, Yura fumbles by asking if he wants to reschedule the date, but Alc says he's fine with just the two of them. Excited, Yura promises to show him everything Fizzle has to offer. Later, as they walk through town, Yura explains that Fizzle is an adventurous city, full of weapons, armor, and all sorts of items, but warns Alc to be careful, since shady merchants often try to scam travelers. The advice is solid, except she's literally falling for one herself. A merchant is trying to sell her a miracle pill that supposedly lets you fight for days without sleep. Alc immediately senses its dark aura and snatches her hand, dragging her away. He decides it's safer to let Ornis and Krasia handle the shopping since Yura is easily distracted, and let's be honest, last time Ornis went shopping, he came back looking like Zorro, and Krasia bought a giant teddy bear. Looks like those two can't be trusted with shopping either. Alc decides to take over the party's purchases from now on, and Yura happily agrees that it would be a huge help. A little further down the street, Alc spots a coffee shop and suggests they take a break. The two head inside for some tea. While sitting down, Alc remembers how Ornis and Krasia seem to really dislike Loki, so he asks Yura what's going on. Yura sighs and says it's a long story, then begins explaining that 2 years ago, they ran into an A-rank party struggling in a dungeon, so they stopped to help. Soon after, Loki and Ruel showed up to help, and together, they managed to take down the floor boss. During the fight, Ornis got a little too heroic and took a bolt of acid spit in the back while protecting one of the A-rank adventurers. After the battle, Ornis tried to act tough, but his legs gave out on the way home, so Loki and Ruel had to carry him back. Everything was fine, until Ornis, while passed out, kept smacking Loki in the head with his spear. Eventually, Loki snapped and tossed the spear into the forest, never to be seen again. Yura didn't think Loki was being mean, he probably didn't realize it mattered since the spear was already in terrible shape. But Ornis really loved that spear. When he woke up and discovered it was gone, he was furious. He might have forgiven Loki if he just apologized, but Loki couldn't understand why anyone would care about a busted old spear. And that, dear friends, is how a lifelong feud was born over a chunk of metal, much to Yura's amusement. Alc agreed with her, but that still didn't explain why Krasia didn't like Loki. Yura shrugged and explained that Krasia didn't really have a reason, she just didn't like his vibe. Sometimes, that's all it takes. A little later, Alc and Yura strolled through town, and Yura reminded him of their old shopping trips back in Galana. They'd pool their money to buy potions, and once, Krasia tried making her own, but her experiments always blew up spectacularly. As they wandered, Yura suddenly spotted an elven ribbon on display and nearly fainted. These rare items boost magic power, and she'd been hunting one for ages, but it cost 50,000 gil, which she didn't have. She groaned, convinced someone else would snatch it if she waited. Seeing her disappointment, Alc decided to buy it. Yura blinked. "Are you sure you want to spend that much on me?" Alc grinned. "It's not for you, it's for the party. Your magic is basically our secret weapon." Besides, Alc was rolling in cash from all the money he'd saved while working as a court magician, so he figured he might as well get Yura something nice. Yura beamed and said she'd treasure it with all her heart, which made Alc grin like a fool. The two spent the day exploring the city, wrapping it up by watching the sunset from the clock tower. Yura asked what he thought of Fizzle, and Alc replied that he loved how free and lively everyone was, it made him feel like a real adventurer. Then Yura got a little serious. She wondered if joining her party had been what Alc really wanted. After all, she'd invited him right after he was banished from the royal capital, and she worried she'd taken advantage of his lack of options. She told him he could leave if he wanted. Alc shook his head. Sure, he had a few unfinished things in Galana, but they didn't matter anymore. His goal now was to make their party the strongest in the world, just like Ornis suggested, and he couldn't do that without Yura and the others. He had zero intention of leaving. Yura was relieved, It was nice to hear Alk actually express himself, since he usually kept everything bottled up. Then Alk leaned in as if he were about to confess something serious, and Yura started blushing like crazy. But instead of a confession, he laughed and explained that he'd lost a bet with Ornis, and now he wasn't allowed to keep secrets. Yura groaned inwardly, realizing he was still completely oblivious to her feelings. The next morning, Ornis came to wake Alk and found him passed out in bed, surrounded by a pile of books. First, he tried calling him, but when that failed, he yanked the sheets off and shouted at him to get up. An adventurer always rises at the crack of dawn. Alk agreed, silently wondering how Ornis had enough energy to be cheerful this early. After Alk got dressed, he and Ornis headed to the backyard for a training session, and boy, they were going at it like two over-caffeinated squirrels. Yura quickly shouted for them to tone it down before someone got hurt, but of course, they ignored her and ramped it up even more, each desperate to outdo the other. The sparring ended with Alk's sword shattering against Ornis, but even in victory, Ornis called Alk a monster for keeping up so well despite being a mage. Deciding to escalate things further, he told Alk to pull out his artifact. Yura groaned and stepped in, warning that someone was going to get seriously injured if they continued. Just then, Loki appeared, smugly offering to coach them as aspiring S-rank adventurers. Naturally, the group ignored him and started walking away. But Loki whipped out an S-rank ID card and asked if they really wanted to snub the person who recommended their promotion. At the mention of the card, Yura perked up like a kid in a candy store, but Loki refused to hand it over unless Ornis apologized for all the times he'd been a jerk. Ornis refused, of course. Suddenly, Krista and Ruel showed up, telling Loki to cut it out. They explained that the recommendation was already approved, and they were just here to deliver the new S-rank ID cards. Cheers erupted, promotion achieved. Then Krista approached Alk, saying that no promotion could repay him for all he had done for her party, and offered her help if he ever got into trouble. Alk graciously accepted, promising to keep it in mind. To celebrate, Loki suggested lunch at a fancy tavern, and everyone eagerly followed. Alk still couldn't believe he was officially part of an S-rank party, but Ornis shot him a glare and warned him not to think he didn't belong. This, Ornis said, is just the beginning of our legend. If Alk let himself get hung up on dumb insecurities, Ornis was going to beat the crap out of him. He nodded, understanding the stakes. Yura proposed a toast to celebrate their promotion to S-rank, and they ordered a barrel of the tavern's priciest booze, much to the obvious pain of Loki's wallet. By the time night rolled around, everyone had their fill. They were ready to head home, except Yura had passed out from overdoing it. Krazia noted that Yura was just in a great mood, partly because of their S-rank promotion, and partly because Alk had turned down the king's invitation to return to Galana in order to stay with them. Just then, Misha came running, looking for Krazia. The guild needed an extra healer, and Krazia agreed to help. She hurried to the infirmary and was surprised by how many injured adventurers were there. Confused, she asked Misha if there had been a failed dungeon raid recently. Misha shook her head. These injuries weren't from monsters, they were caused by people. Apparently, a group of criminals calling themselves the Shadow Guild had been attacking adventurers. The guild master soon called Krazia over again. Another adventurer was in critical condition. Her name was Olivia, and she'd been attacked by the Shadow Guild while alone. With Krazia there, Leviel was confident she'd be okay. As Krazia began inspecting Olivia's wounds, the girl woke up, grabbed her hand, and demanded to know where she was. Krazia explained that she'd been brought to the guild for treatment after the attack. Then Olivia erupted in rage, remembering her betrayal. She swore revenge and begged Krazia to heal her immediately so she could go fight, but Krazia refused. Healing her was one thing, letting her immediately rush into battle was another. Olivia tried to force Krazia's hand, but as warned, moving so much in her weakened state made her pass out. Thankfully, Krazia restarted the healing process, determined to get her back on her feet the safe way. By the next morning, Krazia had finished healing Olivia and was so exhausted she fell asleep at her bedside. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Alk was buried in the library reading about the arcane dungeon when a boy named Leorg approached him. Claiming to be part of the S-rank nameless party, Leorg asked if Alk would join him on a Labyrinth raid. Later, Krazia went up to check on Olivia and found her training with a sword, despite clearly needing rest. Leorg was just sitting there, looking helpless. When Krazia asked why he didn't stop her, he shrugged. Olivia refused to listen to a word he said and wouldn't even explain what happened with the Shadow Guild, stalling his investigation. Krazia firmly grabbed Olivia and insisted she lie down, but Olivia argued that the real problem was her legs. She yelled at Krazia to do her job as a healer. Olivia was surprised that Krazia didn't probe about the betrayal. Krazia understood that Olivia had been hurt by someone she trusted and respected her choice to stay silent. Right now, helping her recover was the priority. Hearing that, Olivia realized Crazia was just a genuinely nice person. Feeling guilty for disrespecting her, she got on her knees and apologized, admitting it was her own weakness that had caused the mess and that she had unfairly taken it out on Crazia. She promised to make amends. Crazia was glad to see Olivia's change of heart but gently told her not to beat herself up too much. Crazia gives Olivia a gentle kiss on the forehead. Olivia freezes, reminded of her own mother, and Crazia notices her lost in thought. When she asks, Olivia quickly changes the subject, requesting a drink. Crazia happily makes her some tea, but before she can pour herself a cup, Olivia mischievously drops something into Crazia's cup. Meanwhile, back at home, Alk meets with Yura and Ornis to discuss his meeting with Leorg and the proposed dungeon raid. Ornis has heard of Leorg and assumes Alk must have been shocked by his appearance, but the truth is that Leorg is older than all of them combined. Alk can't believe it. Yura explains that Leorg is an elf who enjoys acting cute despite being over 100 years old. As for the raid, Alk explains that Leorg wants them to clear the 72nd floor of the dungeon as soon as possible, and promises they can keep the dungeon core once it's done. Alk is skeptical, knowing that Nameless has been trying to clear that floor for months. Seeing this, Leorg reassures him that his party can't handle the dungeon right now. They're busy dealing with the Shadow Guild, since one of their teammates was attacked. So Alk and his party are being asked to handle the raid in their place. Yura thinks it sounds like a good deal, but Ornis starts yelling, saying it's way too fishy. The Nameless party giving up the dungeon is one thing, but expecting Alk's party to also take down the Shadow Guild. Too good to be true. Standing around isn't helping, so Ornis grabs the dungeon core and reminds everyone that the rude girl Crazia healed yesterday is from Nameless. If they want to check Leorg's story, they should ask her. Everyone agrees, and they head toward the guild, but before they can enter, Misha comes rushing out, panicked. She bumps into them and explains that something terrible happened to Crazia, which is why she was in such a rush. Inside the guild, they find Crazia leaning against the wall, barely able to stand. They rush over, and she says she's mostly fine, but she had been drugged earlier, and by the time she woke up, Olivia was gone. Not too hard to figure out who did it. Crazia is worried because Olivia might have returned to the Labyrinth for revenge. Ornis asks why they should care. If Olivia wants to risk her life, that's her problem. Crazia explains her injuries aren't fully healed, so she's not in condition to fight. Ornis understands but still wonders why it matters. After all, Olivia is the strongest swordswoman in the kingdom. The Shadow Guild alone probably couldn't beat her. Crazia remembers Olivia mentioning a traitor, though, so she suspects the Shadow Guild wasn't acting alone. Someone else must be waiting for her in the dungeon. She says she'll go alone, but as she steps out the front door, she notices the others trailing behind her. They argue they can't just let Crazia face the dungeon alone. If she's set on saving Olivia, then they're coming too. Together, they head to the Labyrinth dungeon entrance, but Ornis looks like he'd rather wrestle a dragon than go in. Alk asks why. Yura explains, the dungeon is full of teleportation traps, and groups often get separated. Marbell adds that wandering around blindly is a sure way to end up lost or eaten, so everyone needs to be careful. Useful advice, but the group is still confused about why Marbell is here. She explains she heard Olivia ran back into the dungeon and came to catch her before it was too late. Plus, Leorg asked her to join as a replacement for Olivia's skill set. After all, she's an S-rank swordswoman too. But the real reason? She wanted a front row seat to Alk's amazing magic. Yura is having none of it. Alk asks Ornis what she's babbling about. Alk explains that while Nameless is technically a party, the members act more like solo adventurers forced to tolerate each other. Leorg somehow convinced them to stick together, but otherwise, they prefer doing their own thing. Olivia, for example, hates anyone meddling in her affairs, which is why she refuses help from anyone. Marbell used to hang around Olivia during training, and at first, Olivia tried to shoo her off, insisting she preferred being alone. She even explained that the only reason she joined Nameless was to clear dungeons. This only made Marbell more determined. Eventually, she asked Olivia if she wanted to raid a dungeon together, and Olivia agreed. From then on, they became good friends. Marbell won't force anyone to take her along if it's inconvenient, but she's genuinely worried about Olivia, so she asks the group to do everything they can to save her. Before entering the dungeon, Ornis tosses a wristband to Alk, telling him to wear it as their secret dungeon weapon. Alk has no idea what it does, but he trusts Ornis. As they go deeper, Crazia sets up her own teleportation circle so anyone who falls into a trap can return safely. Ornis is impressed and starts patting her head. Crazia immediately glares. She may be small, but she refuses to be treated like a child, especially by Ornis. Crazia stops what she's doing and dropkicks Ornis with so much force he goes flying, straight into a teleportation trap. Naturally, Alk tries to save him, and steps on a trap himself. Now both of them are randomly scattered somewhere in the dungeon. Technically, it's Crazia's fault. Alk has no clue where he is, but dozens of monsters sure do. He starts casting Thunderbolt non-stop to keep them at bay, but one sneaky beast gets behind him, only to be instantly obliterated by Crazia's arrow. Alk breathes a sigh of relief and wonders how she found him so fast. She explains it's because of the wristband he's wearing, a Mobius ring. When two people wear matching rings, they can't be separated. No matter how many times Alk gets teleported, Crazia will always appear in the same spot. Yura and Ornis have the other pair. Things aren't going quite as smoothly. They're being chased by dozens of monsters. Ornis could handle it alone, but Yura isn't much of a fighter. She conjures an earth pillar to block the monsters while buffing Ornis with light stamina and speed enhancements. With the boost, Ornis darts past the weaker foes and slices the big one's head off in one clean swing. All the smaller monsters scatter in terror after Ornis decapitates the big one, leaving him a little disappointed since he was hoping to use them for warm-up practice. Yura comes down and praises him, and he soaks it up like a sponge in a rainstorm. As they walk, they stumble across the remains of the floor boss. Yura gasps, someone defeated it with a single sword strike. She can't imagine anyone strong enough to pull that off. Ornis, of course, already knows, there's only one person capable of this, Dial, the Blade Master. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the dungeon, the leader of the Shadow Guild is fawning over Meli. Not only did he destroy the floor boss instantly, he also completely humiliated Olivia of Nameless. Meli shrugs, saying the only reason he could handle Olivia so easily is that he knows her fighting style inside out. The Shadow Guild leader nods, impressed. But it makes no sense. If Meli really knows an S-rank swordswoman like Olivia, why would he be helping the Shadow Guild instead of teaming up with her? Meli simply says his goals happen to align with theirs for now, but his ultimate wish is different. He doesn't care what the Shadow Guild wants, he's just here to grow as strong as possible and gather experience. Just then, a group of Shadow Guild members bursts in, reporting intruders spotted on the 72nd floor. The Shadow Guild leader orders his men to kill Meli immediately. Meanwhile, Alk and Crazia stumble upon Olivia, curled up in a corner with fresh wounds. She casually asks Crazia to heal her so she can keep moving, but Crazia refuses, knowing that if she does, Olivia will just dash off again. Annoyed but undeterred, Olivia struggles to her feet, ready to push through the pain. Alk and Crazia block her path. Crazia says firmly she won't let her leave until she explains herself. When asked if it's the Shadow Guild she's after, Olivia scoffs. Please. The Shadow Guild. I could beat them blindfolded. I'm after my former teacher, he's the one who let my mother die. She steps onto a teleportation trap to escape, but Alk and Crazia react quickly, blocking the circle before it activates. All three are suddenly dumped into the heart of a monster den. Surrounded, Alk charges in, but the sheer number of monsters overwhelms him. Crazia decides to heal Olivia so she can fight. She warns that creating a teleportation circle to escape will take time, so Alk and Olivia need to stall the monsters. Perfect, Olivia is more than ready. She leaps into the fray, effortlessly slicing off heads, while Alk struggles to hit the monster's weak points. Watching him flail a bit, Olivia can't resist a jab. Come on, Alk. An S-rank swordsman struggling this much. You need more practice. Crazia finally finishes setting up her teleportation circle and tells Alk and Olivia it's time to leave. But when she tries to activate it, the circle collapses. She quickly realizes this part of the dungeon has an anti-magic barrier. They launch their attack, and as Alk watches Olivia slice through monsters with deadly efficiency, he sees why she's called the best swordsman in the city. Determined not to look like a weakling, he kicks it up a notch, cleaving a monster in half. Olivia raises an eyebrow. Olivia asks Crazia if she's pinpointed the magic eater generating the anti-magic field. Crazia nods, it's over there, but getting to it with all the monsters swarming is near impossible. Without hesitation, Olivia dashes forward, ignoring the risk. Alk bravely draws the monster's attention to give her time. Crazia warns him monsters are coming from above. Looking up, Alk sees a vulture-like monster diving at him. He blocks its talons with his sword. The force is so intense the ground nearly cracks beneath him, but he holds firm and pushes it back. Unfortunately, the vulture keeps coming, and the rest of the monsters aren't giving him a break either. Alk is on the verge of being completely overwhelmed, but there's no time to panic. Fortunately, Alk manages to trick the vulture into taking out one of the giant cyclopes, one less monster to worry about. Meanwhile, Olivia charges toward the magic eater, which turns out to be a skeleton monster. With a swift stab through its chest, she destroys its core. The anti-magic field collapses. She yells to Crazia to start another teleportation circle. Now that Alk can use magic, he casts a 5-fold thunderbolt spell, incinerating the remaining monsters in a flashy blaze. They rush to Crazia before more monsters appear and are safely teleported out. Once safe, Olivia glares at Alk. "Why didn't you tell me you were a mage instead of a swordsman? I feel silly criticizing your skills earlier." Alk grins sheepishly. "Your advice was actually really helpful." But Crazia cuts in. "Safe? Maybe for now. Healing magic isn't perfect. Keep fighting like that and those wounds will reopen, you'll be down for the count again." Recalling that Olivia mentioned a traitor killed her mother, Crazia gently asks for details. Olivia opens up. After her adventurer mother died, she was alone in the world, until Millie took her in. He trained her in swordsmanship, and she grew stronger each day. Millie became like a father to her. But everything shattered the day he revealed the truth. During a dungeon raid, Olivia had just showcased her skills to Millie, and he praised her strength. Then, without warning, he struck her down. As she lay dying, he leaned close and confessed, he was the one who killed her mother. Shockingly, Olivia discovered that Millie had once been part of her mother's party. It's possible that Millie really did kill her mother. The thought that she spent most of her life admiring the men who destroyed her world was almost too much to bear, and it drove Olivia to seek revenge, but he seemed to vanish off the face of the earth. The scars on her back are a constant reminder of Millie's betrayal, keeping her focused and furious. Alk understands that feeling all too well. After being fired from the royal court, he felt like he had nothing left, but his friends reminded him otherwise. He's sure it's the same for Olivia. She admits she has no friends. Alk counters that Lurorg and Marbell genuinely cared about her, but she couldn't let them get involved. As much as she craves revenge, she knows firsthand how terrifying Millie's swordsmanship can be. Seeing her dilemma, Alk and Crazia offer to help her achieve her vengeance. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Ornis and Yura are still wandering the twisting halls, mostly because Ornis keeps falling into teleportation traps. Yura can't shake her concern that Melidile defeated a floor boss in a single swing. A moment later, members of the Shadow Guild appear. One of them is oddly munching on dungeon cores he'd stolen from adventurers earlier that day. Ornis and Yura confront them, and the guild members are surprised to see them. After all, they were told the intruders were from the Nameless Party. But it doesn't matter, their job is to take down any adventurers they encounter. As soon as they strike, Ornis knocks them all out in one go, while Yura casts a binding spell, wrapping them in chains. This outcome is exactly what Ornis expected. These members aren't particularly strong, and he's baffled about why they were eating dungeon cores, since it clearly hasn't made them any stronger. Yura questions the leader about whether the Shadow Guild is after the dungeon core from the last floor. He refuses to answer at first. But when Yura threatens to strangle him with her chains, he suddenly becomes more cooperative. He admits that his boss sent them to steal the dungeon core. Then Yura asks about his connection to Melly, and the men can't stop talking about how incredibly powerful Melly is, capable of taking down Olivia of the Nameless Party and the floor boss on his own. Ornis quickly realizes these aren't the real leaders, so there's no point in pressing further. Before they leave, however, the guild leader mutters a warning. He made a mistake underestimating the power of the dungeon cores he'd been eating. Consuming all those dungeon cores had allowed Gloria to absorb an immense amount of energy. In an instant, he destroys the floor beneath him, shattering his chains in the process. He leaps across the debris, snatching the now unconscious Yura, and shouts to Ornis that he can come down to the bottom of the dungeon if he dares. Meanwhile, Alk, Crazia, and Olivia return to the agreed-upon meeting spot, expecting to find Ornis and Yura waiting. But they aren't there, and Crazia begins to worry. They had all decided that if separated, they would meet back here no matter what. After a quick investigation, the group discovers a massive hole in the ground, something that definitely wasn't there before. The floor and walls of the dungeon were supposed to be magically reinforced, making such destruction seemingly impossible. Olivia peers down into the hole and spots Yura's hat stuck on a ledge. She tosses it up to Alk, confirming that something terrible has happened. At the bottom, the Shadow Guild members have brought Yura to their boss, Gloria. He explains that she is the redhead support mage they've been hunting. When Yura regains consciousness, she demands to know why she hasn't been killed yet. Gloria merely shrugs, saying he has his reasons, but he isn't one to monologue for no reason, leaving her confused. Just then, Melly interrupts, telling Gloria to stop wasting time and focus on the plan. Gloria claims it was just a joke, insisting he takes his work very seriously. A moment later, Ornis crashes down from above, plunging his blade into a Shadow Guild member's back. He immediately turns his attention to Gloria, who reacts swiftly, forming a crimson sword to block Ornis's attack. The other Shadow Guild member, still alive thanks to the energy from the dungeon core he had been devouring before Ornis stabbed him, wonders how Ornis found him so quickly. Then he notices the Mobius bracelet on Ornis's wrist and immediately understands its function. He swiftly removes the bracelet from Yura's wrist, knocks her unconscious, and flees with Melia to advance the next stage of their plan. Meanwhile, Gloria is tasked with staying behind to occupy Ornis, confident that he cannot be defeated. Moments later, Ornis shatters Gloria's sword and drives his own blade through his chest, sending blood spraying across the floor. Just when Ornis thinks the battle is over, Gloria rises to his feet despite the massive wound in his abdomen. He channels blood magic to fully heal himself and declares that he is now going all out. Ornis is shocked that Gloria healed himself so completely in just a few seconds, but he doesn't panic. His brilliant strategy: hit him until he stops regenerating. Solid logic, probably. He thrusts his spear straight through Gloria's chest, but this turns out to be the worst possible move. Gloria starts laughing like an unhinged villain on discount day, yanks the spear out, and explains that his heretic blood magic not only regenerates his body, but actually powers him up the more damage he takes. Before Ornis can react, Gloria slashes him again, and the power boost is obvious. Things get worse when Gloria forms a blood-made whip, because apparently his magic comes with a built-in weapon shop. He snags Ornis by the leg, swings him like a rag doll, and smashes him into the ground. With Ornis dazed, Gloria laughs maniacally, thrilled to finally beat on someone strong again, and decides it's time to finish the job. But Ornis refuses to stay down. He summons his spear back to him, except he doesn't catch it. Instead, he lets it fly past him straight toward Gloria. Gloria dodges, proud of himself for expecting a trick, but he definitely didn't expect the real attack, Ornis sprinting in with his fists. It's a classic Ornis move. Years ago, when he and Alk were still students, the two had a duel where Ornis accidentally launched his spear into a wall. Instead of giving up, he simply charged at Alk barehanded. That technique has now become his signature backup plan. Back in their school days, that duel between Ornis and Alk didn't end in a dramatic victory. It ended with the headmistress storming in, furious because they put a spear-shaped crater in the wall. As punishment, the two spent the entire day fixing it. When they finally finished, Alk praised Ornis for his genius strategy, saying he never expected him to purposely drop his weapon mid-fight. Since things like magic swords drain mana constantly, pulling off a weird distraction like that was actually super effective. Of course, it had been pure accident back then, but Ornis didn't want to admit that, so he pretended it was intentional. And if Gloria gets stronger every time he bleeds, fine, Ornis will just keep overpowering him until that blood magic runs dry. However, as Gloria lies on the floor, he bursts out laughing again. He can't believe Ornis is naive enough to think physical strength can defeat magic. To prove his superiority, he decides to show Ornis the true extent of magic by summoning a being known as Onces. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Levi is trying to have a serious meeting with Lorg, but Lorg is too busy inhaling every sweet in sight to pay attention. Levi asks if it's true that he chose Alk as his raid partner. Lorg confirms it and adds it shouldn't break any guild rules since Alk's party was recently promoted to S rank. He'd also heard the rumors that the five-colored magician had arrived in Fizzle, and he couldn't resist wanting to meet a mage who could use all five elements, a practically unheard of talent. Though he can't confirm whether the rumors about Alk are true, Levi agrees with Lorg on one thing. He's the type who won't believe anything until he sees it with his own two eyes. The idea that Alk and his party set a dungeon record years ago in Galana still feels unbelievable to him. But he does know Yora and the others well enough to trust they wouldn't lie about something like that, so the rumors are probably true. Just then, Marbell bursts into the room, frantically looking for the guild master, and she brings terrible news. She reports that Olivia ran off into the dungeon on her own to get revenge. Levi is immediately worried, but Marbell assures him there's no need to panic, too much, because Alk and the others already went in after her. He sighs, stands up, and heads out to start some emergency damage control measures. But before leaving, he turns to Marbell with one more question. Based on her personal experience, she's seen Alk use only fire and lightning magic. So, what does she think about his real abilities? Marbell says she suspects Alk is intentionally limiting himself to those two elements. Lorg then wonders if the rumors about Alk being able to use all five were wrong after all. But Levi has a different hunch. He believes Alk is simply hiding his full capabilities. Either way, it's a mystery for another day. For now, Ornis decides to meet up with Alk and the others inside the dungeon, since his gut tells him the place is probably crawling with monsters right now. Meanwhile, deep inside, Ornis is staring down the barrel of a death beam, and he's completely out of options. But at the last possible second, Alk shows up like a discount superhero and reflects the spell right back at Gloria. Alk asks if Ornis is okay, and Ornis has never been happier to see anyone in his life. He genuinely thought his soul was about to take unpaid leave. Crazia and Olivia arrive soon after and assume Alk already defeated Gloria, until the smoke clears and Gloria is standing there perfectly fine, like he just walked out of a shampoo commercial. Olivia recognizes the blood magic immediately and knows it's a nightmare to fight. She offers to help Ornis finish him, but Ornis says they have a much bigger issue. A little while ago, Mora was kidnapped by one of the Shadow Guild's goons, Flunky Guy number 384, okay fine, not his name, and Melly. He doesn't know what they want with her, but they called her by name, and he overheard them saying they've been looking for her for a long time. Right now they're dragging Yura toward the dungeon core, and whatever they're planning definitely isn't a birthday surprise. Crazia starts patching up Ornis's wounds and tells him to stay put and help fight Gloria while she and Olivia chase after Yura. But Gloria, being the worst team player ever, refuses to let anyone leave, and immediately fires another volley of death rays like a kid spamming the laser button in a video game. Alk once again reflects Gloria's death rays, kicking up a massive dust cloud, the perfect ninja-level cover for Olivia and Crazia to slip past him. Olivia even tosses Ornis his spear mid-run, earning at least 5 style points. Gloria, meanwhile, is absolutely furious that everyone keeps interrupting his dramatic villain moment. But as he prepares another attack, he suddenly collapses to his knees from exhaustion. Ornis is relieved. Finally, all of Gloria's ridiculous magic spam is catching up to him. If they can keep the pressure on, his mana will drain faster than a phone at 1%. At the same time, Leviel, Luv, and Marble rush into the dungeon. Leviel explains that demon cultists within the Shadow Guild are probably behind everything. Back at Alk and Ornis's battlefield, Gloria realizes he's cornered, so he decides to go all in. He activates his sorcery seal, gaining absurd strength and speed. He blitzes past Alk and sinks his teeth into Ornis's shoulder before Alk can even process what just happened. Alk tries hitting him with lightning, but Gloria jumps back like he's auditioning for World's Fastest Bunny. So Alk abandons aiming entirely and blasts the whole area with lightning. Gloria gets hit, briefly, before smiling again like a horror movie final boss. He mocks Alk, explaining that in this form he can constantly refill his mana using his own blood. So Alk's puny attacks won't drain him anytime soon. Gloria then unleashes a flurry of slashes. Alk manages to put up a shield, but it shatters quickly under the assault. Just as Gloria raises his arm to finish Alk off, he notices something off. Ornis is no longer behind Alk. A moment later, we see Ornis sneaking up behind Gloria like he's about to press the backstab button in an RPG. However, Gloria notices Ornis in time and blocks the sneak attack. With his boosted physique, he's now way too fast and way too strong for injured Ornis to keep up with. After another brutal beatdown, Ornis is left bloody and barely standing. Alk wants to jump in, but Gloria threatens to kill Ornis instantly if Alk even twitches in his direction. But while Gloria is busy monologuing like every classic villain, Ornis regains his footing, channels flames into his spear, and drives it straight through Gloria's chest. As he does, he remembers his childhood, the endless sparring sessions with his older brother, who was effortlessly better at spearmanship. No matter how hard Ornis trained, his brother always won without even breaking a sweat. Still, Ornis devoted every spare moment to training, determined to surpass him one day. Late one night, his brother caught him practicing alone. He was proud of Ornis's dedication, but he also knew a harsh truth. A fatal illness was eating away at him, leaving him coughing blood. He wouldn't be around much longer, and he wanted Ornis to grow stronger than he ever could. However, he didn't want Ornis to find out about his condition, so the moment he was spotted, he slipped away. But it didn't take long before his illness grew too severe to hide. When Ornis finally learned the truth, he was devastated. He shouted that his brother couldn't die because they still hadn't had their long-awaited rematch. Back in the present, Ornis fires another flaming strike straight through Gloria, blowing a fresh hole in his body. Meanwhile, Crazia and Olivia hurry toward the dungeon core to intercept Melly, and Olivia steels herself emotionally to finally confront him face to face. At the same time, Melly and the remaining Shadow Guild member reach the door to the core chamber. When they push it open, they find a staircase spiraling up toward the glowing dungeon core. The Shadow Guild member practically explodes with excitement, sprinting toward it like a kid spotting free candy. He grabs the core, lifts it to his face, and marvels at finally holding it. But strangely, Melly isn't excited at all. He just stares at the guy with pure, icy disdain in his eye. Ornis charges straight at Gloria, stabbing him over and over until Gloria slices off Ornis's arm, but this time, regeneration isn't going to save him. The flames coating Ornis's attacks have burned away Gloria's blood, and without blood, his healing is basically on a permanent vacation. It's far too late for Gloria to back out now. Ornis cuts off Gloria's remaining arm and unleashes a storm of spear strikes, leaving Gloria as nothing but a charred, pitiful torso. Honestly, at this point he looks like a barbecue tragedy. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the dungeon, Yura finally wakes up tied to a tree, with a Shadow Guild member gloating over her. He brags that she's too late, he already has the dungeon core. But suddenly, Melly casually slashes Toro across the back. Toro faceplants, drops the core, and Melly picks it up like he's claiming a prize in a claw machine. Yora's totally confused. Wasn't Melly supposed to be on their side? But Melly declares that now that he's both the core and the seeker, he has absolutely no reason to cooperate with the Shadow Guild anymore. Yora is baffled. Seeker? Since when am I a seeker? Melly explains that he wants her to help him find Eden, a place where dungeon cores can supposedly grant wishes. Unfortunately, Yora has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. She's never heard of Eden, never heard of wish-granting dungeons, and she certainly didn't sign up for magical treasure hunts. Before she can argue more, Toro wakes back up and screams at Melly for betraying the Shadow Guild. He threatens that strong fighters will soon come after him. But instead of being scared, Melly smiles and basically says, "Perfect. I want them to come." He wants to become even stronger, and the only way to do that is through constant battle. The problem? Once you're officially recognized as a swordmaster, people tend to avoid picking fights with you, which is why Melly eventually decides that if he can't find strong enemies, he'll just manufacture them by betraying as many people as possible. Conveniently, Olivia and Krasia show up right then. Yora is relieved to see them, and once she's back on her feet, she tries to bluff Melly by claiming even more of her friends are on the way. This would normally intimidate someone, but not Melly. The man literally just said he wants all the smoke. Meanwhile, on Alec and Ornis' side, Ornis admits he's completely tapped out after the fight with Gloria, so Alec will have to face Melly alone. And just for emphasis, Ornis reminds him that Melly isn't someone you casually throw hands with. He even recalls the academy headmaster scolding him years ago for picking fights, warning him that if he ever challenged the Blade Master, Melly, he'd basically be signing his own obituary. Still, there's no running from this fight. But Ornis warns Alec not to pull any heroic nonsense. The top priority is staying alive. Alec promises he'll bring Yora, Olivia, and Krasia back safely. To save time, he uses the bracelet linked to Krasia and teleports straight to her. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the dungeon, Melly strolls toward Olivia with the confidence of a man who's never heard the phrase consequences, while Olivia sprints toward him. She vows to make him pay for killing her mother, but she knows she can't beat him head-on. So she dashes past him, snatches Yora, and leaps to safety. Once they're clear, Krasia fires a volley of arrows straight at Melly, who now looks like he's having the time of his life. Melia barely reacts to the surprise attacks. He just pulls his cloak over himself like someone hiding from rain, except this rain is made of arrows. Then he calmly turns to face today's challengers. Yura, refusing to take any risks, instantly casts Bind, locking Melia in place while Krasia aims again. She tells Melia that he made a huge mistake letting them rescue Yura so easily, because now their formation is unbeatable, at least according to her. To finish the job, Yura unleashes a sevenfold enchantment on Krasia's bow, boosting her next shot into a max-powered phoenix arrow. A giant ball of fire comes roaring toward Melia, yet he just smiles. He struggles against the chains, snaps one like it's cheap decoration, and once free, slices the phoenix arrow clean in half with a single swing. Yuri is stunned. That was her strongest attack, and Yura even buffed it. Yet he treated it like warm butter. While everyone else is frozen in shock, Olivia launches herself at Melia from behind. But before her sword can touch him, he raises his blade and blocks it without even looking. He sighs, disappointed. She really thought such a basic ambush would work. She should know better. She can't beat him alone. Olivia declares she won't let anyone else take Melia's head. As she charges again, Melia casually notes that Fizzle must have an excellent healer if she recovered this quickly. But in the end, he calls them nothing more than kids playing hero. Friends alone won't cover up that weakness. Hearing those words from Melia triggers a sudden flashback in Olivia's mind. She remembers being a little kid, crying alone in her room, when Melia walked in and found her sniffling like a sad puppy. When he asked what happened, she explained that she got into a fight because some kids mocked her mother, claiming she must have been a weak adventurer to die in a dungeon, and refusing to play with Olivia because she was adopted. Melia didn't blame her at all. In fact, he said, "Yeah, you can't just let insults like that slide." Then he told her something she never forgot, that loneliness could become a source of strength. From that day forward, Olivia trained obsessively, determined to become strong enough to stand on her own, and to one day defeat him with her own hands. Back in the present, she charges at Melia and slashes, but he blocks it with a barely unsheathed sword and sends her flying back with a single push. He follows it up by kicking her straight into a boulder, which, honestly, should file a complaint for workplace abuse. Krasia panics and is about to rush over, but Yura quickly stops her. She warns that neither of them is skilled enough in close combat to get anywhere near Melia unless they want to become decorations on the ground. Even when Krasia fires another arrow, Melia casually catches it, Now he starts walking toward them, radiating pure murder, and the two archers have no idea what to do. Olivia shouts at Crazia and Yura to run, warning them that if Melia gets close, they're doomed. Unfortunately, it's already too late. He's right next to them, and his hand is already on his sword. Just as Melia unleashed a devastating sword strike, Olivia leapt in front of it, refusing to let anyone else she cared about get hurt. She took the full brunt of the attack, shielding Yura and Crazia, but the cost was severe. Her body was badly damaged, and she collapsed to the ground. Crazia immediately rushed to her side, furiously trying to heal her. Meanwhile, Melia simply stood there, waiting. After all, nothing these kids could throw at him would even count as a warm-up. Just then, Alk came crashing down from above, exactly the moment Melia had been waiting for. With a gleeful smirk, he locked swords with Alk and knocked him back in a display of brute strength. Yura panicked and wanted to help, but Alk insisted he could handle himself. He urged Yura and Crazia to focus on Olivia instead. Alk charged at Melia, who effortlessly parried each strike. Seeing this, Alk demanded to know why Melia treated Olivia so cruelly when she had trusted him so much. Melia shrugged and replied coldly that she wouldn't have been hurt if she were strong enough to defend herself. Her suffering was her own fault. This enraged Alk to the point of steam practically coming out of his ears. He lunged at Melia again, but this time, Melia sidestepped easily. "You need to take this seriously," he said. "I already know you're supposed to be an amazing magician, but if you think you can win without using your magic, you're sorely mistaken." Alk realized Melia was right. He couldn't hold back. He summoned his Thunder Dragon spell and unleashed it at full force. Melia just stood there, practically licking his lips in anticipation. As his sword met the attack, it gave him some trouble, but he eventually pushed back the spell, something Yura didn't even think was possible. Melia then sliced through the spell completely, smirking. It had even made him bleed a little, and for the first time in a while, he was genuinely challenged. "You, Alk, are what an adventurer should be," he said. But he didn't think Alk was a great magician. After all, that lightning spell, while flashy, had no true killing intent. He considered targeting Yura to motivate Alk to fight harder, but Alk read his thoughts. "Leave them out of this," he growled. "If you want murderous intent, then you'll get it from me alone." Alk thought back to the promise he had made to Ornis not to take risks, but he knew this was the only way out. He began channeling all his mana outward. Yura realized what he was about to do and shouted that they needed to stop him, but it was already too late. Normally, it's impossible to replenish mana externally, but Alk had invented a spell called Limit Break. It allowed him to expel all the mana in his body while drawing more from the environment. The toll on his body was enormous, but in this state, there was no limit to the magic he could wield. This was his trump card. And once it's activated, there's no turning back. However, Alec Igrit is an exception to that rule. For years earlier, while the team was preparing to fight the Hydra, they searched the library for any useful information and discovered some truly terrible news. The Hydra has 5 heads, each tied to a different element, and the only way to kill it is to strike all 5 at the same time. The problem? There were only 4 of them, and Rain Ornis couldn't use magic at all. Luckily, Alec already had fire and lightning covered. The remaining elements were another story. Crazia and Rose technically had an affinity for air and could use it with enough practice. Anne Rose, on the other hand, had affinities for earth and water but was hopeless at attack spells, no matter how hard she trained. Feeling useless, she apologized to everyone. Rain, however, wasn't worried. He had already thought of a solution. Since mana exists everywhere, Rain reasoned that if someone could draw in external mana directly, they could use all elements at once with a nearly unlimited supply. The idea sounded amazing, and extremely dangerous. No one had ever heard of safely absorbing external mana, and even if Alec managed it, that mana was basically poison. Still, ignoring all common sense, Alec grabbed a stack of books and went off to research it alone. That research led to this moment. Eisen's Yura explains that in this state, Alec can freely use all the mana in the surrounding area to cast any kind of magic without limits. To demonstrate, Alec instantly creates a 5-layered elemental barrier against Mihaila. At first, Mihaila holds his ground, but he soon gets caught in a wind spell. Though he cuts his way out, he still ends up with a wound on his chest, the first time anyone has ever injured him. Seeing this, Yura and Crazia become confident that Alec might actually win. Alec keeps up the relentless wind attacks, forcing Mihaila onto the defensive. To everyone's surprise, Mihaila is clearly enjoying himself. Alec is the first opponent in a long time to truly challenge him. He draws his second sword and slices through the incoming spells, charging straight at Alec with a grin, until the sword finally snaps from the strain. Dropping it, he thanks Alec, saying he only grows stronger when facing someone who can genuinely threaten his life, just as he'd expect from the apprentice of Eldas. Hearing that name shocks Alec, who immediately asks if Mihaela really knows Eldas. Mihaela confirms that he does, and that he also knows Alec has been searching for him. Still, he warns him not to try. Elves may want to be found, but Alec definitely isn't the right person to do it. Mihaela assumes there are many things Eldas never explained to Alec Igret, including the truth behind his mother's death. Alec was likely told she died from a plague, but Mihaela scoffs at that idea. Someone like Alec's mother wouldn't fall to something so trivial. Ornis demands to know what he means, but Mihaela only says that Alec will learn the truth someday. For now, he's done talking, and it's time to keep fighting. Pulling out the dungeon core, Mihaela channels its energy into himself and enchants his sword, eager to discover Alec's true limit. After all, there's no way Alec can maintain such a dangerous form forever. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Rain explains Alec's limit break to the others. It allows him to freely use all 5 elements, but at the cost of turning his body into a vessel for overwhelming amounts of mana. If he stays in that state too long, the consequences could be severe. Rain tries to stand and rush to Alec's aid, but his injuries force him back down, making it clear he's not going anywhere. Meanwhile, there's still the issue of Gloria's remains, which might resurrect. Leviel orders the casket he brought to deal with it. A bald man steps forward, places a coffin before Gloria's corpse, and activates it, dragging him into a torturous limbo, ensuring Gloria won't cause trouble again. Even so, Leviel doubts that Alec, genius or not, can handle Mihaela alone. Marbell wonders if there's really cause for concern, since wide-open spaces favor mages. Leviel disagrees, explaining that Mihaela likely possesses the dungeon core, the true heart of the dungeon. Unlike ordinary cores, it grants overwhelming power. That's why Mihaela was promoted to S rank despite being a one-man party. He's strong enough to rival an entire team by himself. He's deadly with a sword, but Mihaela can also use magic, and absorbing a dungeon core massively boosts mana. If he truly has it, then Alec Igret is in serious trouble. Back on the bottom floor, Mihaela unleashes a brutal mana slash at Alec. Alec reacts fast enough to raise a shield, but the attack is far stronger than expected and shatters it instantly. Just in time, Aizen's Yura jumps in and stacks several barriers in front of Alec, barely redirecting the blast. Unfortunately, Mihaela has plenty more where that came from. Yura tries to block the next wave of slashes while Alec retreats, but one slips through and smashes into him, sending him flying. The strain from his limit break is catching up fast. He won't last much longer like this. From the sidelines, Silveria Loki finally regains enough strength to speak. She explains that Mihaela is using Mana Blast, the only attack spell he knows, but one that becomes terrifyingly effective in his hands. She has a plan to stop him, but it'll take time, and until then, Alec has to survive on his own. He's already been in limit break for 5 minutes, and his body is nearing its limit. Another mana slash comes flying. Alec blocks as best he can, knowing he can't keep this up forever. The real problem is the dungeon core powering Mihaela's attacks, but Mihaela gives him no opening. At that moment, Yura burns the last of her mana to bind Mihaela with multiple spells. He breaks free quickly, but the distraction is enough. Alec counterattacks, unleashing dozens of spells at once. Mihaela cuts through them effortlessly, even when Alec combines fire and lightning into a massive attack. The result is a deadlock, and Alec will run out of energy first. Just as doubt sets in, Krasia and Rose calls out with an idea. She reminds him of the monster nest where magic was useless due to an anti-magic barrier, and suggests recreating that situation. As Alec draws his sword, Mihaela fires another mana blast. This time, before it can hit, Krasia deploys an anti-magic barrier around the two of them, completely dispersing the attack. Now only sword strikes will work. While the anti-magic barrier shuts down Mihaela's ranged attacks, he calls it a foolish move. Magic was the only reason Alec Igret could keep up with him. Limiting the fight to blades should mean instant defeat. Alec calmly downs a healing potion, raises his sword, and admits he can't win alone, but he isn't alone. He charges in and clashes with Mihaela, only to be slashed across the chest again and driven back. Unimpressed, Mihaela notes Alec looks exhausted and figures his limit break will last maybe another minute. The odds are terrible. Then Alec remembers the sword lesson Silveria Loki taught him in the monster nest. Treat the blade as part of your body. He commits, and attacks again. Mihaela parries the opening strikes, but when he counters, Alec ducks under and slices at his head, leaving a cut across Mihaela's face. Instead of anger, Mihaela grins. Alec has exceeded his expectations, both as a magician and, surprisingly, as a swordsman. Eager for more, Mihaela lunges, but Silveria suddenly cuts in and slashes him across the chest, catching him completely off guard. She demands answers. Why raise her with care only to make her hate him? Mihaela says she'll have to defeat him to get them. Alec and Silveria attack together, but even combined, their swordplay can't overpower Mihaela. Alec's body finally starts to fail from the strain of limit break. Declaring the fight over, Mihaela raises his sword, then the anti-magic barrier shatters. Realizing magic is back, Mihaela goes for a mana blast, but Yura instantly blocks with a barrier. Alec seizes the opening and fires a lightning spell. Mihaela tanks it and moves to retaliate, only for Silveria to jump in and block his blade, buying just enough time for another lightning strike. Mihaela survives again, but as he focuses on stopping Alec's casting, Krasia and Rose spots an opening and snipes him from afar. However, only a handful of people can hear the voices of dungeon cores. These rare individuals are known as Seekers, and Yura is one of them, which explains why the Shadow Guild was hunting her. The revelation Mihaela drops leaves the group stunned. Silveria Loki, however, is furious. She refuses to believe Mihaela would betray her just to chase a wish. Mihaela stays silent, until Alec Igrit, barely holding on, yells at him to stop hiding the truth. After all, Mihaela already agreed to explain everything if they defeated him. Realizing Alec is right, Mihaela finally begins to talk, starting with Dungeon Syndrome, a disease where the dungeon's power twists people into monsters. Back when Mihaela was younger, he was in a party with Silveria's mother. Despite his lack of close friends, the two worked well together. Years later, Mihaela found her collapsed against a dungeon wall, fully consumed by Dungeon Syndrome and barely recognizable. With what little clarity she had left, she mentioned a wish and begged him to fulfill it. Unable to fully hear her words, Mihaela believed she was asking for a merciful death before losing herself completely. As painful as it was, he granted her that wish. Afterward, Mihaela found Silveria and took her in. He trained her in swordsmanship, partly because she shared her mother's talent, and partly because it was the only thing he truly knew how to teach. Over time, Silveria grew attached to him, and Mihaela found himself enjoying her presence more than he expected. Everything changed the day Silveria called him her father. Instead of happiness, fear hit him hard. Guilt over killing her mother resurfaced, stronger than ever. Nightmares followed, visions of Silveria's mother calling him a murderer and insisting he had no right to stand by her daughter's side. Those doubts slowly ate away at him, making him question whether he had truly done the right thing. After all, Mihaela never truly heard what Silveria Loki's mother wished for. For all he knew, she might have been asking him to find a cure instead of ending her life. That uncertainty ate away at him until he learned about Eden, a land said to grant any wish. Convinced he could turn back time and undo his mistake, he abandoned everything to pursue it. He doesn't make excuses. Leaving Silveria without the truth was his choice, and he accepts that her hatred is justified. Believing death is the only fitting end, he tells her to finish him off. At that moment, La and Marbel arrive, with Marbel nearly crushing Silveria in a relieved hug. Seeing her like this reminds Silveria of everything she gained while training to defeat Mihaela. Painful as it was, it shaped who she is now. Turning back to Mihaela, Silveria says she has no intention of killing someone she has already defeated. Instead, she'll take him to the surface to face judgment for his crimes. Stunned, Mihaela warns her that sparing him won't erase her past trauma. To his surprise, Silveria calmly replies that she's willing to live with those scars because they don't define her. Hearing this, Mihaela realizes she's far stronger than he ever was, even if it still hurts to imagine the life she could have had if he hadn't been consumed by guilt. Soon after, Leviel arrives with the casket. It's been a while since he's seen Mihaela, and he's far from pleased. Even if Mihaela didn't cause widespread destruction himself, conspiring with the Shadow Guild makes him a criminal. Leviel bluntly tells him that if he was going to self-destruct, he should have left Silveria out of it. Mihaela doesn't argue, he already understands the weight of his sins. He simply tells Leviel to do his job as guild master already. Leviel calls over the casketer and orders him to prepare. As the casket activates, Mihaela turns to Alec Igrit and admits he fought well, but leaves him with an unsettling thought. What will Alec do when he learns the truth about his mother's death? It would have been the perfect moment to ask, but it's too late. The casket seals shut, locking Mihaela away. With that, Leviel's work is finished. Before leaving, he tells Silveria Loki that she owes several people apologies for how she behaved back at the guild. Marbel jokes that Silveria has a long day of apologizing ahead. But as she pats her on the back, Silveria suddenly coughs up blood and collapses into the water. She had been pushing herself on sheer will despite the massive slash across her chest. Marbel urgently asks Krasia and Rose to heal her. At the same time, Alec starts feeling lightheaded from the strain of his magic and passes out as well. Later, Krasia heals Silveria, clearly annoyed that this is the third time she's had to do so today, especially after how rude Silveria was earlier. Realizing her mistake, Silveria apologizes, admitting it's hard not to be reckless when Krasia's healing feels like a safety net that can fix almost anything. With the mission complete, Krasia wonders what they should do with the dungeon core. Alec says it should belong to them since they defeated Mihaela and the Shadow Guild. Yura disagrees, arguing it wouldn't be fair. She believes La should keep it, since his party has been clearing the labyrinth for years, and Mihaela was the one who defeated the dungeon boss anyway. La, however, points out that they were the ones who defeated Mihaela, while he did very little, giving them the stronger claim to the core. He casually tosses the core to Yura, but the moment she touches it, it starts glowing. Seconds later, she collapses. While unconscious, Yura sees a vision of a golden tree inviting her to enter Eden and eat its golden fruit to make a wish. It tells her to gather the dungeon cores and come to Eden, promising it will be waiting. She suddenly wakes up back home in bed, with Alec Ygritte asleep in the bed across from her, clearly out cold from abusing limit break again. Thinking he looks kind of cute like this, she leans in to kiss him, only to notice Rain Ornis watching from the doorway. Alhacia Rosa is also in the corner, quietly observing just to see how far Yura would go. Mortified, Yura screams, which promptly wakes Alec. Later, Yura tells everyone about her strange dream, and they realize Mihaela's talk about wishes was likely true. The core probably triggered the vision. Wanting answers, Yura asks Krasia and Rose to hand her the core again. Krasia hesitates, warning it could be dangerous, but Yura insists. This time, nothing happens. There's still a lot they don't understand. Based on what Mihaela said, the remaining Shadow Guild members will continue hunting dungeon cores and seekers, meaning Yura is a target. Alec suggests she lay low for a while, but Yura refuses. She wants to search for the dungeon cores herself, even if it means confronting the Shadow Guild. So, she needs to find answers somehow. Ornis is completely on board with the plan and is already looking forward to beating up the Shadow Guild members, while CRA has no objections either. However, Alec points out one major problem: he can't use magic anymore. Later that day, Alec meets Olivia, who is stunned to hear that the strongest magician is currently magicless. Alec calmly explains that this was expected, using limit break comes with side effects, and temporary magic loss is one of them. That's why he asks Olivia to help him train his sword skills instead. If the Shadow Guild is targeting Yura, they could attack at any time, and showing up unprepared would be a very bad idea. Olivia understands the danger but asks Yura an unusual question: whether she has any siblings. Yura admits she doesn't know, as her family situation is complicated. That answer doesn't clear much up, but Olivia explains her concern. While hunting Mihaela, she learned a lot about the Shadow Guild, and one name kept appearing: Guren Izens. Since Izens is also Yura's last name, she suspects a connection. This is the first time Yura has heard of Guren, but Olivia is convinced it's linked to why the Shadow Guild is after her. With danger increasing and Alec knowing he lacks experience fighting humans, he decides to train seriously. Luckily, a martial arts tournament held every 3 years is about to begin in Red Rogue. Fighters from across the continent will participate, making it the perfect place for Alec to sharpen his skills, especially since the prize is a dungeon core, which makes the risk more than worth it.